Vaughn, you got anything for us?
No, just listening.
Okay, thank you. Business arising from the minutes. The Bowen Island Resilient Community Housing, next steps. All right, I'm just gonna hand it over to you, Robin.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, great. Well, in the agenda here, we've got the whole history, which is lovely. So
Yeah.
there's a few pages of what the
Yeah.
site was as of last year, and then a couple of options that I sketched out and then met with the health center, and that we land on the final option, which is page 10 in the agenda.
Okay.
So this was, so I met with the health center last week and went over kind of their parameters and the things they've heard, went over what we needed. We went back and forth a little bit and essentially came up with this plan that got them the space they felt they needed, and I think I was copied on that. They wrote a letter today,
Yes,
yesterday.
yeah.
Yeah, so they feel that they've got the site that they need with expansion. I'll let them cover their needs. And then we feel confident that we can make this site more than work for what we're proposing, which at the moment we've landed on about 24 units.
Okay.
So I still say about approximate, because this next step, once we have the site confirmed, is to work with our development consultants in the feasibility stage. So that's what we're just discussing today. We'll likely be looking at 3 different scenarios. So there are 3 different funding options essentially, and seeing how the numbers work out and what the mix is and what that means for the different things. Because, for example, the one I keep referring to, the BC Housing, has a very specific mix of rent levels. CMHC has some very specific things for energy efficiency and accessibility. And then the third option we'll be pursuing, I'm just kind of calling independent. So if we actually didn't do any of those government ones and went with funders like Van City or other ones who give preferential lending, so what would that look like? And so that's the 3 options financially that we'll explore, and we're aiming for 24, and we'll see what they come out as. It'll be something around there, so I'm confident we can more than fit that, and I think come up with a really nice design on this site.
Right.
And then we did come up with the idea for some shared access in the middle. We'd share that sort of laneway split between our property.
Okay, now so just,
Yep.
no, I've got this one, the latest one. Right?
Yep, that
But-
page 10.
So if we went back, is that
Well,
what
yeah,
you're
so I
talking
mean-
about, sort of like that idea?
Well, yeah, and I mean, I just did this, when I was exploring options, right? Shifting
Yeah.
up to that site, not knowing what their site dimensions were and all of that kind of stuff. So there is some topographical challenges with that lane, that way I've
Yeah.
shown it. So that's why the health center went, oh, I'm not sure if that'll work. And so we went to this new version, and then in our discussions, we both realized, well, they want to, again, I don't want to speak for them, but from what they've told me, they want to put some parking on site.
Yes.
For staff, I believe.
Yeah.
So we sort of realized, well, they're gonna need some sort of car access onto their site. And I realized for us, even just simple things like garbage and recycling pickup and those functionalities of having a building, we're gonna need vehicle access of some kind. So we just thought, why don't we split the difference, have a little, we'll have to work that out with easements or however it formally works. I
Yeah.
don't know the legalities of it, but we thought, why don't we split the difference? We'll figure out how deep it needs to go, but essentially knowing that from whatever this access is for parking, if it's a road or parking, I'm not sure, but whatever this access is in the gray area down here, as long as we know that we need our car access
Yes.
into there. So, it all seemed to work. It means we avoid the rock outcrop, which, and we'll leave
Nice.
that parking design till later, but if that needs to be leveled a bit for parking or something, or we can, like in one of the previous plans, we can go around the corner and avoid it. I think there's some options there to be explored, how the parking might work out. And it all really depends how much the municipality wants to provide for community parking, right?
Yeah.
So we'll leave that for a later stage, but it'll fit. And it also maintains, and a few of us were down there this evening for a walk around, it maintains essentially where that existing path is, that curves around that rock outcrop
Yeah.
that connects the parking to the park.
Perfect, yeah.
So that's pretty much where that sort of hatched connecting path is, that is maintained, and our site goes from there up to the fire hall site. And it's fairly, if you do go independently, there are some flags, like flagging tape that marks
Okay.
the boundary between the municipal and
Yeah.
the park.
Yeah.
So you can get that sense, you can sort of get a sense of where the fire hall is. There is a bit of flagging tape on the
Excuse me.
ground. And then pretty much, it just about, by happenstance, the middle of it pretty much lines up with the edge of their CMP property, and there's a shed there, so it's fairly easy to orient if you go to that start of the park and line up, so you can get a rough idea of what the site is. Yeah. So, and I think the board, we've discussed it in my email, and my board is on board, and so, well, I mean, certainly there's details to be worked out.
Yeah.
in terms of, you know, with hopefully between the health center and us and the fire hall, with, you know, logistics around sewer and lift stations, and
Yeah,
if we need some easements,
absolutely.
and we can work with staff about the subdivision, and then what we're hoping from tonight, if everything's a go, that we would get a recommendation, I guess, from this committee, that council would approve it at the next meeting, and then, preferably, I don't know how we can fast track it, but if we can fast track the agreement to lease, that would be our request for next steps. If we can just get that resolved as soon as possible, and I know that will probably take a little bit of work to get done, so, you know, I'm sure lawyers will be involved, so like figuring out what the legalities of that, and again, details about sewer connections and stuff will get nutted out in that agreement, so we really would love to get moving on that as fast as possible.
Before we get into any deeper discussion,
Yeah.
I would just like to thank you so much for the effort that you put into this,
Oh,
and
You're welcome.
for also your collaborative efforts with the health center. I think it's really greatly appreciated.
yeah,
Yeah.
thank you, yeah, it was,
Well done, yeah.
mhm.
We sent you on a mission and you came back 100%.
Yeah.
See, if I have a problem, hire an architect,
Well,
right,
there you
Chris? We're problem solvers.
I think Daniel and Adam would argue with you.
No, I agree.
I like it well.
Any other discussions? I guess we could talk about parking, so how many units do you think you're gonna put on the property?
Well, so we're aiming for 24, and
Okay.
I think we need a variance, Daniel, but we would aim for half a
Yeah.
space, so 12, let's say,
Yeah.
but, you know, say we ended up at 28, we need 14. So it's still a slight moving target, but it would be somewhere between 10 and 14 spaces, let's say. And that, like, I mean, I've done a very rough layout, I didn't, you know,
Yeah.
but that would essentially kind of fit in the corner, you know? And I'm happy to look at on-site parking if it works, but I'd rather not commit to that if I can at the moment, but, you know, if it works out that blasting that rock is prohibitive or whatever, you know, we're happy to, again, be partners and explore all of the options, but, yeah, it fits. We could get the health center parking, our parking, and then I think roughly 20 community spots-ish.
Do we have a copy of that?
The parking
That
layout?
copy you've got there, yeah?
No, I didn't share with you guys the parking layout, I didn't wanna. Yeah, it's all right, because only just because I didn't want to get into the weeds, you know, like. we can work
Okay,
that
but
out.
is the parking on-site or is it off-site?
No, at the moment, we're assuming it's off-site.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Off-site.
Sorry, yeah, off-site. We're open to looking at
Oh.
parking on-site, but I'd rather not commit until we get a little further into our design.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right. Maureen?
Yeah, so I'm trying to figure out within the community parking area, how much of that would be committed in perpetuity to the health center and to BIRCH.
So, I mean, that's an important question to me, because I think there's an excellent job here in terms of designating the space for the health center and the space for BIRCH.
Yeah.
But if we are also tying up at least half as much again in community parking, that's something that I think the committee needs to think about. And I mean, part of what we talked about in the last council was that there was an expectation that as time went by, there would be less and less need for parking. People shifting to alternative modes and being more comfortable traveling that way. But I think as a committee, we do need to kind of think through
Yeah.
this parking issue in a bit more detail. And then I did have a couple of questions, just quick ones. Your development consultant, is that still City Spaces?
Yep.
Great. And the topographical challenges for the roadway between the sites, what are those challenges?
Well, that was something that just the health center and I talked about when I'd shown them my plan, because again, it was just a quick, how could this fit on the site? And they went, oh, but just the grade changes and how do you fit parking on quite a steep grade change? You know what I mean? So do you just do a big ramp and go down, or you know, how do we retain the grade? It's just hard to, until you get further into designing the buildings, it's a little hard to commit to, oh yeah, we can just, like I kind of had shown, you know, oh yeah, we can just fit all of our parking along here, and it's like, well, you know, it's I think it's about a 3 or 4 meter drop from where the start of it would be to the end, which I know isn't dramatic, like we're not talking a cliff face, but it's a little probably steeper than standard parking, so it's more of a, it's just how to deal with it.
Okay.
And again, I haven't, it's not the right, I can't think how to conjugate. I haven't got too deep into the design of the building. I've done some volumes and just made sure, yes, we can definitely fit what we need on there, but I'd be a little hesitant right now to commit to saying, oh yes, absolutely, we can fit all of our parking on our site. I'm not quite there yet.
But you could potentially fit some of it on your site.
I certainly think that's possible, yeah.
Actually, the health center would have the same issue with
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
road, so maybe you could work together to make that.
Although, you know, they're building, I can't remember what they're building about, what, in like their footprint's about 6,000 square feet, so, yeah, and I don't know what ours will be at, I think they're building out, I can't remember what the total was, under 10,000 square feet, whereas our ballpark is about 21,000 square feet. So, you know, ours would be much taller,
Yeah.
which I think we all knew, right?
Yeah.
So,
And are you thinking 3 stories, 4 stories, or are you still?
I think
have that variance?
it'll be somewhere in there, yeah. Again, we sort of said on site, I'm not sure that I can totally commit to 4 stories at this stage, just because, again, it's so early. I was just for a different job doing a bit of code research and realized, oh yeah, there's some building code implications going from 3 to 4 stories. So I think I'd like to, again, kind of reserve judgment until we sort of get a little further into the design as to whether we can commit to that, but, you know, it's certainly possible, and this site gives us that opportunity, and I don't think I'd go like a full wall of 4-story, it would probably be something, you know, articulated.
Okay,
Yeah.
and then just 2 more things. Just remind me that if it's a fast track to the agreement to lease, what does that mean? Is that July, is that June, is that
Let's say in an ideal world, June 30th.
June 30th, okay?
I don't think that that's actually possible, given, you know, but it would be really nice if we could get that going as soon as possible. And
Basically, it's eliminate the constraint, right?
yeah, and we pretty much, and I just was at a session hosted by Van City today and met with our contact at CMHC and talked about it, and essentially, that's an we need that before we even apply for the next phase of CMHCC funding. Like, it's an absolute, that was one of their, why we weren't ready last fall, is they said, you have to have that, like, concrete.
Okay.
So we need that agreement to lease before we can get to that next funding stage. And I think we sort of vaguely talked about it last meeting, you know, it all looks good, but next spring's coming pretty fast when you start backtracking to the amount of work that we have to do.
Right.
So thankfully, CMHC is responding pretty quickly to the seed funding request, so we don't have to wait months, it's actually like weeks, which is
Wow.
great. So it means if, say, for example, it pushed to July and all that stuff, so we need to get it soon.
And then just my last question was for Daniel. Could you comment on the plan? Sorry.
He's seen it before.
It's pretty early
Yeah.
days.
I mean, I know in terms of the access where it is into it, to go to the back, I mean, that's, I think, where the current access is, and I know when we looked at the plan, the previous plan last fall, that's where Bob had wanted the access to be. So part of my concern moving like the health center up to Miller is not to add another access point, to try to keep that. That was always the goal when the fire hall went in different places, to say we don't want, you know, a driveway every 6 feet or whatever down up the road, and so having one is nice. Yeah, I'm not sure how else to.
Tom?
Yeah, I just wanted to, just following up on your points about the lease, you know, it's early days, but I just wanted to put some ideas on the table. You know, I think what you'll be looking at is an undertaking from council about what the terms and conditions of that lease will be. Because in order to actually get a registrable form lease, you're gonna have to have the title.
Oh yeah, it's
So
an agreement to lease,
And I'm
that's
hoping
what we're
that
looking for.
your lenders, for example, would understand that, you know, this is a work in progress.
Mhm.
And so if you can get you know, if you can work with a draft document, because it won't be finalized until all of that legal work is finalized, but I
Letter
think
of intent.
the lease itself is
Yeah.
not, it's not a difficult document to prepare.
Mhm.
It's more about the steps that have to be taken first to get to that final document. And as long as everybody understands that,
Mhm.
it should be fine.
Yeah, and so my understanding is the one that we're after now is an agreement to lease, so
That's
it's
right.
essentially laying out, yes, we will give you a
That's right.
lease if you meet these things, and here's what the lease will look like and the terms and conditions, and
Yeah.
presumably, here's what's still to be resolved, right?
That's right.
Like, we will
That's
work on
right.
these over the next few months, but assuming we get these resolved and you meet this and we meet that, you will have a lease. I think that's the type of document, that's my understanding.
That's all it
Draft.
could be in that time frame, I would say.
Exactly, oh, agreed, yeah, because there's no way this is gonna be subdivided
Okay, good.
anytime soon, right? Yeah.
Yeah, as long as the intent is there, that's
Yeah,
going
it's an
forward, that's what
LOI.
we want.
Yeah.
So I see this, if we can agree tonight on A, the size of the property, B, the location of the property, and C, I think, and I'm asking for the board to come in, but I think parking is kind of essential. I'd like to see, and I think we can go 0.5, and I'm not saying that we would definitely go 0.5, but that seems to be the standard on something like this now.
Mhm.
And, you know, so that's 12 units, and I'd really like to see that on the property.
Oh, you wanna see all 12 on the property?
Yeah, but, you know, that's, I'd like to see an effort in that direction anyway,
Okay.
I think.
Certainly, I would agree. I would like to see at least how your planning goes, in order
Print
to
is
see whether there's a way to
distracting.
accommodate that number of parking stalls on the property. If there is, that, I think it would be really, it then provides more flexibility to the rest of the land and how it would be used.
Yeah, and so one of our thinking when we were, you know, with the health center and I were looking at this, and when we shifted up, was, you know, and if you look at the bigger plan is, you know, and I think to Maureen's point, who knows what parking is gonna be in 20 years, right? So
Yeah.
parking, and I'm not imagining this as a glamorous parking lot, I'm not sure what it's gonna look like, but that's like the easiest thing in the world to change, right, in 20 years. As this gets developed, the RCMP is done, everything changes, right?
Yeah.
So that was why we thought this would work, and, you know, we can renegotiate parking. So I'm not sure if that's something, I'm certainly not prepared today to completely agree to putting all of our parking on site, because as I said, we haven't done the design yet. And so for me to commit to that, and I'm not there yet, I'm very willing to explore it. I'm very willing to look at, if not all partial, you know, like look at what we can do to meet that. But until we get to the next steps and actually start to get into the design of the building, I feel like we would be a little constrained. And again, not so much that there isn't physical space on the site to fit parking and the building, it's just working with the topography, right? And how is that gonna work and how is access, because you know, you don't wanna park on a slope.
No, exactly.
Or too much of a slope, right? So it's just figuring that out and how much cut and fill is gonna be needed to make those things work, and big retaining walls and, you know, all of that kind of stuff. So I feel like it's a little bit early, but if that can be a term on the agreement to lease, that, you know, we need to negotiate parking and how that's gonna fit on the site,
Yeah.
that's absolutely fine,
Okay.
yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah, that's great.
Maureen?
Can somebody show me on the map what, where the current commuter parking lot is? Like how much of that community parking space is taken up?
Vaguely, oh, look at
By
that
that
pointer,
lot.
I want to take it as I am. Oh, that's gonna go on there. I think we have a sketch, but, so, I think that, because there's a strip of trees at the fire hall, right?
Yeah.
So it sort of is between here and, actually, the current driveway is like almost on the property line, it kind of comes in there.
Okay.
So there's two driveways.
So,
two
there-
driveways,
yeah, and
yeah.
the second driveway is maybe around there,
Right.
right?
Oh, okay.
So it's pretty much this area, there's lots of
Yeah.
trees, and it does come out, like where we were standing was about in
That's
line with
about
this
right,
here,
Yeah.
and where this is, so there is some parking probably at this edge. So it's kind of about there, let's say. So this is still quite natural forest, not
Yeah.
too many trees, but natural forest. It kind of, and you know, it's a very odd shape with lots of
Yeah.
trees everywhere, but I think the extent is about sort of there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
I
this
think
is
that's-
again the rocky outcrop here, so it
Yeah.
does kind of come up to that edge.
Yeah.
And
So
that,
it's that.
Robin, that trail where it connects, is that fairly accurate, that end of it?
This end?
Yeah, like where the rock, no.
I think so, I was
in there,
following
yeah.
the vague contours, and these are
It
pretty
looks
rough
right to
contours.
me.
And
Yeah.
I stood and measured to that,
Okay.
like with my laser measure, I stood and measured to that shed
Okay.
and got this approximate. So
Okay.
it's
pretty
as close as we can get without a
Yeah.
full survey. Yeah, so it's pretty, and it's, yeah.
So I guess that's a good sort of reality check about that parking, because,
Yeah.
you know, the public parking is gonna be taken up by both of these developments, so probably 50% of it maybe.
So yeah, sorry, I should have, could have shown it. So I had, I don't know how many they need, but I think I had fit 8 or 10 through here. And then for the 12, it basically kind of wrapped around here,
Yeah.
depending on how it's laid out. And then if you did that, it was 20 or, I mean, depending on how you design it, right? But,
Yeah.
so yeah, there was certainly enough for whatever that adds up to, 40-ish.
Okay.
And again, it's kind of generous, you could be a little more, you know, you can, depends how it's gonna be done. I didn't wanna get into design parking lots. But I did enough of a rough estimate to figure out that it would fit. And I think in one of those plans, I sort of bent it around the corner, because again, if you don't wanna blast that,
Yeah.
I think that
No,
you
I-
could get through there a little easier, but I'm not a
Yeah,
civil engineer.
I think that's gonna be an issue because a desire to have your parking on site to as great an extent as possible, because otherwise we're going to be losing parking for the commuters and that sort of thing. And actually, I love that big rock. You know,
Oh,
like,
me too.
like that could be.
Get over it.
That's I know it's pretty tall.
Yeah, it would be nice if we didn't have to touch it.
Well, it could be, you know,
I know.
doing some planning, you know, with an entry there, it could be a real feature for that whole development, you know.
Yeah.
But in any event, we're probably gonna have to add some additional parking on the land to the south. So, you know, so both you and the health center, you know, as much parking on the site there as possible, would be great, you know.
What we're
But-
trying to do, and I assume both groups are trying to do, is to use that land as effectively and efficiently as possible.
Of course, yeah.
And so, if we can fit parking here, the best way to fit parking in,
Yep.
this is what we work on.
No, I think
Yeah.
it's great.
Yeah.
I really appreciate that.
Mhm.
And that parking lot was always conceived as a temporary.
Yeah.
Yes,
Oh, yeah.
Right.
and it's used to its maximum, I think, every single
Well,
day.
as somebody that uses that parking lot quite regularly,
Yeah.
and I walk down that trail all the time, so I didn't have to do a site visit, I'm really familiar with it. But I think actually, what's not a bad way to think about this in terms of the public's perception, Dennis, back to your point on the parking, is that we're contemplating here now reducing the size of that existing parking lot. And really, I think it's a good way to signal to community that this is a temporary parking lot. There are gonna be changes occurring as this lot 3 goes through the various stages of development.
Yeah.
And so this is not a bad incremental start where some of that parking is gonna alter. Maybe it's not gonna change in numbers, but the shape and form of it's gonna change.
And for the community to see what they're getting in exchange.
That's
Yeah,
right.
exactly.
That's right.
Yeah.
So I'm not uncomfortable with that.
Yeah.
So it's give and take, you know, it's balance, that's why it's gotta be, there's no question. All right, anybody else got anything?
I'm just very pleased.
Yeah,
Yeah, me too.
I'm really pleased that you work together with, I see Tim just walked in, so that's great. Because the way that you've used the land, it looks like, as David said, you're using the land carefully and well. And that's what we were looking for in this whole exercise, so I'm very
Yeah.
pleased.
And intensely.
Yeah,
Fairly
that's right.
intensely.
So the extent the parking can be on the land, that's great, we could look into that. So, very good.
best efforts.
That will be a goal, a
Yeah.
focus and a goal for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah,
Okay.
That's great. Well
So
done.
I'd like to move forward.
Thank you.
yeah. Perfect. So,
Do we have a motion?
Community, don't have a
We
recommendation.
don't have a recommendation?
Community lands recommend that council accept, endorse, accept, adopt the site plans presented by BIRCH at its May 9th, 2019 meeting.
Support, I would say.
No, I would say approve.
Oh, approve.
The council's the only one that can approve.
Do we recommend the council?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so we
Recommend that.
Recommend the council.
Okay.
Yeah, recommendation to
Yeah.
approve what though, with
Yeah.
location, size,
Yeah, put it all down.
meeting that all?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's not just BIRCH, also for the health center. Yes?
Yeah.
Are we not meeting them next?
Yeah, I don't know what discussions have been held so far with the person.
My understanding from correspondence was that Robin was authorized to present this on behalf of.
Yeah, we agreed on the plan, and I think
Oh.
Tim, the health center, has sent a letter that essentially says, yes, we want to proceed with this plan, and so I think it's safe to say, Tim, if they approve that tonight, that would be fine by you?
Thrilled.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so it's
Let's-
both parties.
Yes,
Yeah.
please. Let's do it.
So,
well, we should also discuss the health center then, while we're here.
Yeah.
Could I give my solution?
The council approved the site plan as presented by BIRCH and the Health Center Foundation as presented at its May 9th, 2019 meeting.
I would be very specific about the sizes.
Okay, so
Yeah.
very
And
second.
also the desire for the committee to include as much parking
Parking
on
on
each.
site,
Size, location, and parking.
parking on site as
What
possible.
would you say, best efforts?
That's
Best efforts for
Then
parking
you
on
have to
site?
be, you have to be
Okay.
more specific than that.
To maximize
Yeah.
on-site parking.
Yeah, okay.
Could there also be a mention of the desire to fast track that, also I've lost my mind.
to lease?
Yeah, the agreement to lease.
Yeah, that's the
Is that
same or
too
separate.
Do we need that in writing, or do we just?
Yeah, we sure do, because it'll
Yeah.
take staff away from other priorities, so
Well,
absolutely we need that.
um,
But I would suggest that's a separate resolution.
yeah, I agree, but I would certainly like to commit to that, because this has been a long drawn-out procedure, and I think everybody's tried really hard, and we committed as a council at the beginning of the year, when we put the postponement on there, that we would work as hard as we could to get through as quickly as we can, so that's.
So
that's
all
what we
you can do
wanted
is
to
make a recommendation to
That's
council,
correct,
and on
yeah.
May 27th, we'll be
Correct.
prioritizing our strategic plan anyway, so that this will be part of it.
Could we also list what we would like to see in the lease agreement? I mean, because we've gone through and sort of listed that out previously. We had it on our minutes.
I think it's too early.
Sure.
I think there's
Yeah.
a lot of detail that we
Yeah.
would not be able to cover in that.
I agree.
We probably want some legal
It's
advice.
a pretty lengthy legal document. I
Yeah.
wouldn't,
Well,
I would presume what the language may look like.
okay, I just thought there were about 4 or 5 key
Major
principles, major things about the lease that that we have an interest in as part of it, and it's sort of.
Well, what we should probably do is mention them now, just to make sure that there isn't a huge objection.
Can I suggest we
Going forward.
start with
This.
the first resolution,
Yeah.
the size of the lots, where they're located,
Yeah,
and then go on to subsequent to each one.
So council approved the site plan as presented by BIRCH and the Health Center at its May 9th, 2019 meeting, including the size and location of the parcel of Lot 3, along with a commitment to maximizing on-site parking.
We actually want to say 0.15 hectare for the healthcare center
Yeah.
located on the
North,
Northwest.
northwest, yeah.
northwest corner.
Northwest corner.
Yeah.
next to the
Sorry,
fire hall.
0.15 hectare for the health center.
Yeah, on the northwest corner. Past Mill Road.
Oh, northwest corner of Lot 3.
Of Lot 3.
Along the side of the road.
Yeah,
Along the
Adjacent.
road.
adjacent to it.
Okay, and then for Birch,
Same size,
0.15 hectare for Birch. On the
northeast corner, adjacent to the fire hall
And
Adjacent
the
to the
health
park.
center.
and the health center, and park.
Yeah.
Park and fire hall.
So the whole
And the
side
parking.
fire hall.
Please refer to the following.
Yeah, and maybe,
Well, and then as attached to.
Yes.
and make sure you got the title on that, the Lot 3 proposed site plan.
Right, May 10th.
That's the latest one.
Okay, so 0.5, so we've done the size, location, of Lot 3. And then, in addition, that there's a commitment to maximizing on-site parking.
Mhm.
I think the committee should be very clear with council as to what their desire is for parking. And if it's,
With best efforts to locate parking on site.
I mean,
Well,
certainly.
Required parking.
Yeah.
Well,
And that being,
Could we not just say intend to maximize on-site parking?
Yeah, I think that, you know, like, for the health center, if you go through the numbers, like, kind of did that just kind of quickly, but the lot is about 16,000 square feet,
Correct.
16,000, right?
Mhm.
The footprint of the building is about 6,000, right? That is 0.4 FSR.
Mhm.
Then they have about, Tim said about 1,700 on the upper floor, that's called 2,000.
Mhm.
It's about 8,000 total, which is an FSR of 0.5.
Mhm.
But about the 0.4, the 6,000 square feet, if they actually imagine a rectangular building
Mhm.
that you either put on, against the north
Yeah,
or the south property line,
yes.
then it actually requires less than half of the lot to put the building
Yeah.
on. The other half at the bottom is available, and it's wide enough for double-loaded parking. So for instance, I'm not saying you should do it, but if you say that the whole half of the parcel is for future expansion, which we all want to have,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
The building doesn't have to be 2 stories to accomplish that. It can actually be exactly as they showed on the original sketch.
Yeah,
You know, they had a quarter upstairs, you know, yeah, that actually is their program.
yes,
Then the other half of the lot that lays there empty can either just be beautiful in its natural state, which doesn't exist anymore, or you say there's temporary parking on it, and actually fits more than 20 stalls, because the width of it is 120 feet.
yeah,
And even if you allow 10 feet of stalls,
yeah,
right? So if you go property line to property line, you would have 12, right? Let's say call 10, right?
yeah,
Trees, whatever, right?
absolutely, yeah.
You double that, you have 20. So they actually can provide 20 temporary stalls on half of the lot. Right, I mean, this is a theory, right? Then you can say,
Yeah.
well, what would you use that empty half for expansion? You could probably have some temporary facilities on it that you can easily remove, like a garage or so,
Sure.
right? If you ever expand, just take the garage away, right? So there's a ton of flexibility by laying that out. So like if you're looking for temporary parking for the medical center, they can put 20 stalls on site if they want to,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
But then if you say, well, the shared parking has to be used by the medical center, well, initially not. But the nice thing about having that half empty is that, let's say in the future, if the land is more valuable, you know, or it's harder to find parking, well, guess what? It's the right size for below-grade parking,
that's right.
if that
Yeah.
ever may be necessary in the future, right? And then you can go up 2 stories, you can go 3 stories, whatever you want. Yeah, so to me, it really, that site really works well for them, but I
Yes.
do think that, yes, they can provide their own temporary parking, for sure,
Yeah,
you know? And that if that's 20 stalls, and then if BIRCH is looking for stalls, even as Robin was saying, if you put a few stalls along the south property line, then they may be on their own lot, right?
yeah,
Only the stalls, not the driveway. That's only like, what is it, 20 feet out of
yeah,
134. So like, I mean, both of them have potential. I would say BIRCH can easily do 10, and the health center can do 20.
well, you're talking right in here.
Yeah, just
Yeah.
it's something like something simple, right? I mean, I'm not
Yeah.
saying is that they can, but what Robin was saying, that they may need 10 or 14 spaces. So if you say, well, if you can get 10, great. If you can't, or whatever, right? But it looks to me that BIRCH can put on 10, and the health center can put on 20. And then it just kind of, it's temporary, but it will move, right? One day, maybe the health center needs that for expansion, you know, and then, for instance, the commuter parking, it's temporary, and it can move to another part of the community lands one day. Or people have to walk a bit further, well, too bad, you know?
And I am trying to put this diplomatically, but I find in resolutions, as a committee or council, if you're very clear about what your wants and needs are, by being vague, there's no motivation to try and fit that parking on the site. So I think, and I'm talking to the committee right now, is I would suggest you be very clear and firm about what you want as a committee and your resolution to council. Council may decide not to pursue it, and I'm not saying which way you should go as a committee, but whatever way you
Yeah.
decide, be clear in your resolution itself.
And we have, sorry, Maureen, we have increased the size of the lot. I know it's not a huge amount, but there's certainly some parking in that increase.
Can I just
Yeah,
show
absolutely.
you on the map? So when I planned it out in one of those earlier site plans, again, because of the change, so I mean, I think we're at least 3 or 4 meters from here to here.
Yeah,
So what I'm just thinking while we're here is, one of the most obvious solutions to me would be to basically kind of, to some degree, ramp down and get to a lower grade,
yeah,
and then put it, so we'd have, say, a laneway, and then parking off of that.
Like you have on the
Like
stars
that,
right
like
here.
I had it on one of the earlier
This
plans,
one
right?
here.
The one on page 8, for
Yeah.
example. So I think it would be that we sort of retain a bit, ramp down, and then that, and I'm speaking for 10 years, like for the health center, but that opens up that corner for them. It gets us down, because the fire hall site's significantly lower than here, so it gets us down to there.
yeah,
And then we can deal with that change in topography, so it makes that lower, and that's whatever, but, so we would just have to see, I mean, it's 41 meters, so we'd have to see what we could fit there. But I see that as kind of the easiest solution, and the minimal amount of like asphalt or gravel or whatever it ends up being, because as soon as you start doing more, like you just get so much circulation. Whereas the idea being if we share the drive aisle as a laneway or whatever, the parking's off of it, it's the most efficient use, you know, just double load corridor, or whatever you wanna call it. So that's kind of, I think,
Yeah. I mean, Fritz's thinking, I think, was what if you put it on the southern property line? And we
Yeah.
said instead that the drive access is actually along the southern property line for both of you, and you direct.
yeah, so.
Yeah, that's it.
I mean,
I don't
it's
know.
certainly possible, my hesitation with that being, this is where that rock outcrop is.
Right.
And if you've been there, this
Yeah.
pathway
Goes
is
down.
pretty much
Yeah.
right there. Like, there isn't, you know, 20 feet or whatever you need
Yeah.
for a proper drive aisle. To really, you'd have to blast, we'd have to, you know, and again, this also slopes, possibly even more.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's, I mean, again, we can look at it, but I feel like that's really, if we're trying to avoid even touching this thing for all of our costs' sake. And the other thing being that south, so for us, I haven't designed the building yet, but I have a vision of some kind of courtyard in the middle of this building,
Right.
whether it's this shape or an L or something, that's the south, and it would probably be nice if the cars weren't there. I don't know, I'm just,
Yeah.
again, it's not designed yet, but, for me, or, I mean, in an ideal world,
Yeah.
if the fire hall would let us, we could use their nice big driveway and we could park off the back here, but I'm guessing the fire hall's been fairly clear that they don't really want the regular public or even residents to use it, but that would be an ideal solution.
Yeah, I don't think that.
I don't think that'll fly, but I
it's
just
gonna
throw it
work.
out there.
Maureen, just,
Yeah, just.
thanks, Robert.
Just coming back to the resolution and the concern about vagueness around parking. Would language such as with the expectation that all or most parking requirements will be met on site, give council the comfort
Yeah.
that they need?
Yeah, it's a starting point.
Yeah. And is that okay with you?
I think so, yeah, that sounds reasonable. And the other thing that's occurred to me, and not that we have to commit to anything tonight, but let's say we end up with 26 units and there's only
Yeah.
space for 10 parking spaces, that's our variance application. If that's what we want, do you know what I mean? I'm just saying, if it's a possible solution.
Yeah.
If we can only get X number of spaces, but we have X number of units,
Yeah.
then maybe that's the variance application.
Yeah.
And we just kind of accept that there's gonna be a bit of overflow into the community parking, which hopefully, being guests in the evening of residents or people going, you know what I mean? Like, it's
Yeah.
compatible
Yeah.
uses for the commuters. So if that's a possible solution that might move this forward, then that's, I mean, again, I feel it's open enough for us to come up with a solution as we move forward with the design.
All right, David?
So I like Maureen's words, but I was thinking of adding, I mean, I like the fact that the two groups work together to work on the land. It would be good to work together to optimize the parking as well.
Yeah.
So, you know, if you go down the middle or something like that, then that can work for both of you, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's one, if you go down the middle, it's absolutely correct, because the health center isn't necessarily gonna be that active in the evening, but BIRCH is gonna be active in the
Yeah.
evening, so there's gonna be a bit of a.
So I was wondering, dropping those words in, that the two organizations work together to then achieve, I forget what your wording was
I just
exactly.
said, all or most parking requirements will be met on site, and that there is a collaborative approach taken by the organizations.
I don't even know if that's really required. I mean, I think what the committee and then what council does is set the sandbox, so to
Okay.
speak.
Yeah.
This is, and how the two groups work together. I mean, we can encourage the two groups to work together to provide parking. But I think it's just those clear parameters of what the committee and then council wants with the site.
Okay.
I think council's, under the way we've been working this, I think council is giving them the opportunity to work together. And
Correct.
I think that's
Yeah.
a smart place to put
Yeah.
it.
All right.
That the committee recommend that council approve the site plan of Lot 3 of the community lands as presented by BIRCH and the Health Center at its May 9th, 2019 meeting, including allocation of 0.15 hectare for the health center on the northwest corner of Lot 3 along Miller Road. Allocation of 0.15 hectare for community housing on the northeast corner of Lot 3 adjacent to the park. And that there is an expectation that all or most parking requirements will be met on site.
Adjacent to the park and the fire hall site, I would say, just
Is
to
there
put it
any
into
way you
that
can
corner.
put that up on the screen, stuff? I'd like to see the words.
Okay.
Before we.
Stephanie said May 9th, it's May 14th today.
It looks like you could get a full
And
two
the plan
bays
is dated
of
May 10th.
parking across
Yeah.
here,
Would be very clear.
and that's expansion
Because there's all
for
kinds of
the
plans.
health center.
And the only thing, I don't know if Tim's allowed to join in, but there is more detailed site plan that they've developed that I didn't show.
Yeah.
But, and I think it was sent out to the
Yes.
committee, that they do have the ambulance access and they have some stuff happening there. So again, I wouldn't want to commit them to that either, but,
Well,
yeah,
the ambulance goes in there,
yeah.
but then, you know, with this lane, you know, there's certainly parking off of it and there as a possibility.
Yeah, and then I
Yeah.
think also, again, if Tim wants to speak, hopefully he can speak up, but I do know that hopefully everybody would understand, the committee and council would understand, they will need some right near the entrance, right? Like in that community parking lot, they'll want a few at grade near the
Oh, yeah.
entrance,
Yeah, yeah.
accessible and all that stuff. So as long as that's kind of not off the cards, because
Yeah.
I'm, again, this is just from what we discussed, I'm sure staff is very happy to park at the back and lower and all that,
Yeah.
but they need for, especially people with limited mobility, they're gonna need spots for them
Yeah.
designated in that area right near the front entrance, which they're orienting towards Maple, which I think is really nice. So I just wanna make sure that doesn't get lost.
Some 2-hour parking.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Yeah, which would be good. You know, it'd just be public parking, well, it'd probably be designated for that center, I guess at that point, I don't know.
It's just
Anyway,
one
these are
point of,
particular, yeah.
I'm not used to this kind of stuff, so I'm not quite sure of procedure, but I'm just a bit concerned about writing this with Tim sitting there.
Yeah.
We're not really hearing
Yeah.
anything from him
Tim
on
should be.
the health center. I want to make sure we're not putting something forward that
Well,
is not going to go.
As Robin said, we have provided some parking already on our concept
Okay.
plan.
Mhm.
The fact that we've got about 16 or 18 feet change in elevation from one corner to the next complicates things a little bit. Unfortunately, Dan isn't here, that architect, to speak to those things, but we certainly, as the plan shows, plan on providing parking
Okay.
on the site.
So you're okay with the way this resolution
Yeah,
is
so
coming about?
whatever.
Okay, well, that's all I really was concerned about. Okay, thank you.
All right.
Proposed suggested revisions, one is to add after May 10th, 2019, for a portion of lot 3
Good, yeah.
of the community lands, blah, blah. And then in the last bullet point, an expectation will be met on the lands allocated to BIRCH and Bowen Island Health Center Foundation. And get rid of on the lands allocated to BIRCH and the Bowen Island Health Center Foundation, and then get rid of the rest of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Do we want to say least
Do you
too?
want the adjacent too?
No.
No.
Don't we have
No.
allocated?
No,
Just
no,
allocated.
because we
Yeah.
want them on that land if possible.
Yeah. Should, in the second bullet, it just says community housing, should we say Birch?
The
Is that
full-
okay with just community housing, or should you have your name?
Yeah, Birch would be
Next
better, I
although-
think.
I know,
No,
we're consistent, right? If it's
Yeah.
gonna be Birch here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Acronyms.
Huh?
Sure, we're acronyms?
Oh, yes.
Does that work?
And to go
Community
back,
housing, yeah.
to go back to the preamble, as presented by Bowen Island Resilient Community Housing on behalf
Okay.
of BIRCH and the Bowen Island Health Center Foundation. I'm sorry, I'm channeling Allison.
Oh,
Not
that's so
only I
sad.
did that.
That's so sad, yeah.
Somebody has to do it.
That's good.
Yeah, yeah.
That's very good. I like that.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'll move it.
Second.
Wow, definite energy there. Any further discussion? All in favor? Right on, thank you. See you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
It's been a bit of a journey here,
Yeah.
and, but I think we both achieved our goals, I think. We're certainly happy with where we're going to
Yeah,
council
no,
with
and
this, and I think,
We're very pleased with the site we
yeah.
So I'll just
Super.
put a button here, I don't know, we'll leave, but if there is a motion for the agreement to lease and expediting
Yeah,
that.
oh, yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
well,
There were two other motions.
Okay.
What were they?
that was a big one.
Yeah.
there was something about an agreement to lease.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And fast tracking.
June 30th.
I think fast tracking.
Yeah, I'm happy with fast track.
Yeah.
That's,
You'll recommend that council fast track?
Direct staff.
Direct
Prioritize or fast track?
What about a date? Say,
Yeah.
wouldn't it be better just to plug a date in there and say,
What do you call it?
Fast track to
What's
meet
the
a
verb?
deadline of June 30th.
What's the word?
Yep.
Use for,
Don't
Put it in
expect
there.
the council
Yeah.
next, only a month before then.
Yeah.
That's, I think a month, I have no idea how long this takes.
I think the least.
Judy had a working draft
Yeah.
of the agreement to lease.
it's not that tough.
So I might just have to change the numbers around.
Yeah,
so.
so she's in tomorrow, I'll talk to her.
Oh, good.
Draft
Okay.
it.
Tomorrow's fine.
Oh, come on.
It's only quarter to 8.
Yeah.
Direct staff to expedite the processing of an agreement to lease between the municipality and BIRCH.
Agreement to lease for the lands allocated.
Could you put that up, Seth?
Okay. So it's two different scans here. Oops. Okay.
Thanks for that.
Well, what's the type of architects in my writing?
No, it's not a processing for agreement to lease, it's,
The
drafting.
drafting.
Yeah, makes sense.
Constant, yeah.
Of the.
Why don't we just say
Sure.
draft
One of the ones, yeah,
agreement
like-
rather than drafting of an
Just
agreement?
has a drafting.
Sorry?
The draft agreement.
Yeah, yeah.
Just the draft architects when you're like, oh, that's when you come home and just go
Agreement
down.
to lease for,
The 0.14.
5.
0.15 hectare portion of lot 3.
Recommended allocation at this point? 'Cause it's not-
I would just, maybe even just say as referenced in the above noted resolution, for BIRCH and the Healthcare Foundation.
Do we want to do both?
Well, a draft agreement to lease isn't gonna necessarily work on the health center.
Like,
So it's
to
gotta
lease
be,
between.
it can only be BIRCH.
So agreement to lease with BIRCH, right there, yeah.
Yeah.
That's
So
right.
this
I mean,
is
we've
BIRCH.
really, at this stage, only been asked by BIRCH to fast track the lease. I think we're already dealing with the healthcare center separately on this issue, so I would just leave this
Yeah.
to do with BIRCH.
It's a separate one.
Yeah.
And report back to council no later than their meeting on July 24th. Sorry,
June 24th?
sorry,
June
June 24th. July
Right.
24th is my dad's birthday.
September 1st. what's it? Should we put a year in?
It's.
Yeah.
The council meeting,
Yeah,
the June 24th council
yeah.
meeting.
Back. I don't know if it's report back or present the lease, the draft lease no later.
Present.
Yeah.
Staff could report back with no lease.
Present.
It wouldn't tear.
This was tougher than we thought.
The draft. Yeah. Draft agreement, okay.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah. Ooh.
So moved.
That's good. Thank you. Second.
Second?
All right. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Sorry.
You done? You get it in there? You get it?
Okay, is there another one?
There wasn't another one. What was the other one?
That was it.
Yeah.
Does that give you what you need?
thank you very much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Clap again?
Yes.
Tim, everything's okay? Anything else from us?
Well, like I say, I mean, I've got to go back to my board, which isn't here, unfortunately, because we didn't know we would be speaking, so, but we certainly can provide some parking on the site, I know that. Beyond that, I can't commit without going back to the board.
Yeah.
No.
Well, and you need to do design, detail work, and how you then deal with the topo and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So this will be brought forward to council at its meeting on May 27th, so it would be good to have agreement from both organizations at that meeting.
Happily.
Well done, thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, Robin.
Very exciting. Thank you, everybody.
We'll get her,
Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, yeah. Thank you.
Good.
Yeah.
That was a great day of progress.
Then,
Yep.
I think we're where we want to be.
Yeah.
I'm totally satisfied. I think it's great the way this
Yeah.
came together. I think there was some good thought that went into that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I looked at that rock today, Dennis. Your favorite
Well,
rock.
Yeah.
It would take very long.
Okay, take care.
That's true.
When we blast it, we'll give Dennis a piece.
Yes.
So, gateway requirement, oh,
People spend a
we
lot
did
of
well
money
here,
building
yeah.
something like that.
Hey,
so,
Gary, can I say
Yeah.
something about Robin?
yes.
Yeah, it's something they find. Sorry?
We're still
Yeah,
in
we're still
the
in
meeting.
Well, it's very positive.
Okay.
So, and it's fine with me.
Sure would be.
You know, I was at the annual meeting of the Architectural Institute, and at the end of the meeting, the Lieutenant Governor, and you know that story?
I don't know the detail, I know she was excited.
All right, she was very excited, and so an intern architect, a young female, and Robin Fenton, a young architect, also female, were selected to give a very inspirational presentation to everybody who was in the annual meeting, and so Robin was the person. And she was so inspirational, it's unbelievable.
Isn't that great?
I thought, good for you. Like, you know, and she basically inspired everybody to participate at the Architectural Institute, and Robin is doing that. She's in all kinds of committees there.
Mhm.
So in addition to doing BIRCH and being architect, she's also active at the ARBC,
Yeah.
and she basically says she loves doing that.
Isn't that great?
She's
She's
somebody-
an extremely positive
She's
person.
truly someone
Yeah,
who makes things happen,
Yeah,
you know?
Yeah.
good.
Yeah, this is, I think that's interesting background maybe.
Yeah, no,
Thanks
that's,
for telling us for this. Yeah. That's huge. Where does she
very,
get the
very
time?
capable.
Yeah.
Any further discussion on that in the open? I think they fairly content. We'll see what they come back with. And I don't know how the process, whether it'll come back to us or not. The final plans, I think it's probably just gonna go to the planning department. It's,
Yeah, I mean, we talked, when we started this process, and I know the committee had talked about leases and clauses that would be in the lease and the
Yes.
discussion, so I don't know if that's something that council would want to say, is to draft it and to report to the committee before coming to council.
I'd sure like to see, maybe particularly Tom's input into the lease itself.
No, I'm happy to do
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
For sure.
There's also been some concern expressed at council about the lack of written reports from this committee. So I think with the significance of this decision, we need a written report. Doesn't need to be
be loaned, just needs to be written.
We'll make that.
I hear that, but I actually think the resolution covers everything off. I will deal with that, council member. But it really, it's a fully fleshed out, resolution, and I'm not sure what else we could add.
It's pretty much on the video.
I promise
Template.
Okay. What we put in the report is, here's the resolution. Hi, Allison.
All right, so if there's no further discussion, we'll move to the closed meeting then, as stipulated in the minutes.
Okay. Press service,
Oh, maybe.
use the disposition
Okay,
plan.
yeah, okay, thank you.
I guess we don't need to read it, because we already did it at the,
Yeah,
the agenda.
yeah, we did, but I think we could add under section. So we can change.
Okay. So change it to the acquisition, disposition, or expropriation of land or improvements.
Great idea.
Do we turn the camera off?
Close it.
Yeah, closed. Done, adjourned, yeah.